An autistic person always keeps learning, but I'm still going to be autistic. But you always keep learning. It's never too late to start. I mean, I was very lucky to get very good early educational intervention by the time I was 2.5 years old. When I was a little kid, I had no speech until 3.5 to 4 years of age. I can't emphasize enough the importance of early intervention. Also, the movie showed very clearly how my science teacher really helped me. This brings up another really important thing, the importance of mentor teachers. And we need to be developing the child's strengths. There's different kinds of minds out there. I talk about this in my book, Thinking in Pictures. And, I'm the visual thinker mind. I think in photorealistic pictures. Can't do algebra. Some of us need to be jumped right to trig and geometry. There's another kind of mind, is the pattern thinker. This is the guy that'd be a good computer programmer. He'll be grades ahead in math and needs to be allowed to go grades ahead in math, but he may need special ed in reading. And then the third kind of mind, kind of on the autistic spectrum, is the word thinker mind. They know every fact about their favorite subject. They often make great journalists, and their math abilities are just average, and they are definitely not visual thinkers. And we need to be building on a child's strengths. I cannot emphasize the importance of Dr. Carlock, and he got his honorary doctorate for the movie, that mentor teachers can make, and we need to be thinking a lot more with all students. What is this kid going to do when he grows up? There needs to be a lot more career development and jobs. By the time I graduated from college, I had a lot of work experience. I had took care of 9 horses when I was 15 years old, cleaning their stalls, feeding them, did carpentry work, I did sewing job, I worked in a research lab, and kids need to be getting these work experiences. I spent half a day with Claire Danes, and she videotaped our meeting, and then I sent her all these old tapes that I had, like from the late 80s and the early 90s, and she put those on her iPod so she could just listen to me all the time, and she really got my mannerisms and my voice. It was so weird hearing this interview thing on NPR that had Claire Danes as Claire talking, Claire as me talking, and me talking all in the same interview, and sometimes I could hardly tell my voice from hers. It was just like really totally weird. I did get to read scripts, and I also had a lot of input into the cattle stuff to make sure that the cattle were all presented accurately. It accurately portrayed autism, absolutely, definitely. Mick Jackson did a fantastic job of showing how my visual thinking works. Claire Danes did an excellent job of showing me in the 60s and 70s, before I took antidepressants, when I was much more nervous than I am now. The sensory issues, like sensory overload in the cafeteria, that was shown very accurately. Clinically, as far as autism is concerned, the film is very accurate. Well, I'm a visual thinker. I mean, an animal doesn't think in words. An animal is a sensory-based thinker. They think in pictures. They think in sounds. They think in touch sensations. It's very detailed. See, the autistic world is a detailed world. I take lots of little details and I sort them into categories, and that's how I form concepts. It's bottom-up thinking. That has to be how an animal would think. There's no other way the brain can store information. Basically, I translate the written words into pictures. Like when I read a book, I translate it into pictures. My mind basically works like Google for images. You give me a key word, I start to get images. And the movie shows very clearly how all these horse pictures came up of specific horses. That's exactly how my mind works. Now, one of the reasons why I had to have all the door symbols is when I was younger, I didn't have a vast database of information in my mind. Now I don't use doors anymore because I have, 40 or more years of information stored in my mind, so that some new experience can be understood by comparing it back to something in the past. Well, I think animals really do have, real cognition. There's been some very interesting research with crows. And a crow was able to figure out how to bend a piece of wire to make a hook to reach down into a tube to get a little bucket full of treats out. Blue jays can plan for the future. There's an experiment that was done called a cheap hotel room and the expensive hotel room. And their first cage is the cheap room, never has any food in it. There's a lobby cage, and then a cage with a fully stocked minibar. And during the day, the blue jays can run around in all the different rooms. But then at night, they get locked in one of the rooms. And the jays very quickly learned to take food out of the expensive room and stick it in the cheap room so they'd have breakfast in the morning. Now animal thinking, their association abilities are way less. Like dogs will often get afraid of the place where they were hit by a car because that's what they were looking at the minute they got hit by the car. They don't have quite enough association cortex to realize the car did it and not the place. Well, the biggest barrier was I was breaking into a man's world. And in some ways, being autistic may have helped because as long as the feed yard didn't actually throw me out, no matter how much the cowboys rolled their eyes, I wasn't even picking up on that. The thing I had to learn is I had to sell my work. The way I sold those jobs was showing off pictures of facilities I had designed, drawings. I made a portfolio of my work. I learned I had to sell my work, rather than myself. And I had it very early on. I made a very nice brochure, with a lot of pictures. I'd send clients drawings, I'd send clients photos, and also articles I'd written for the various cattle magazines. Well, you might have a person, especially on the lower end of the spectrum, all of a sudden have a great big temper tantrum in the middle of a supermarket, and he may be in sensory overload. Also, people with autism, surprises are bad. But where we get some of the worst problems is where we have people that they have had no contact with autism. They don't know anybody that has autism. They just, there's still some prejudice there. I talked with a large company that had, did a lot of work with having people with all kinds of disabilities work in their warehouse. And about 80% of the managers are just great to work with, and about 10 or 20% of the warehouse managers just don't get it. Hate to say it, but I had a very interesting dinner conversation one night with a very progressive company that's employing people with all kinds of handicaps in their warehouses. Well, there's a lot of people that just need to be educated, and then there's a few people that just have an attitude problem. I've found on training people to handle cattle, you take 10 people, 2 or 3 are natural cattle handlers. Oh, 5 or 6 can be trained, and there's 1 or 2 that you need to fire. And I had a fascinating conversation with a professor at an educational university that, teachers ed college, on training teachers in the classroom. And they said when they get in the classroom, there's about 3 that are really naturally great teachers, there's another 5 or 6 that I can train, and there's 1 or 2 that are just hopeless and you need to get rid of them. And that's the same thing that I've found with cattle handling. We got to get kids out doing things. And another thing that, we had a great discussion this morning on, because Debbie has a goat farm, a chicken farm, was bringing young Girl Scouts about 11 years old out to see the chickens. And they stroke their first chicken and they go, oh, well, she's soft. And then get to reach in and get an egg out from underneath the chicken. And I think those kinds of experiences are extremely important for, for kids. I think we need to be doing a lot more of those kind of things. Half of Silicon Valley has got some degree of Asperger's, and if you got rid of all Asperger genetics, you wouldn't have the next generation for Silicon Valley, and you wouldn't have the next generation that could solve the energy crisis. See, autism is a continuous trait that goes all the way from very severe, remains nonverbal, have to live in a supervised living situation, all the way up to brilliant geniuses. Einstein would be labeled autistic today in many school systems. Tesla, who invented the power plant, would be labeled autistic today. It's like a little bit of this trait. Give you a really smart person. He's going to be a nerd and he's not going to be very social, but he's going to be really super smart. And the lucky nerds, they get to work out in Silicon Valley, and the unlucky ones, I'm seeing too many of them going down a dead-end rut, and we need to be working on developing these kids' strengths because they need to be doing jobs because they get their fulfillment out of what they do in their work, doing useful work.